A racist yelled at a black cashier until Justin Bieber stepped in and changed everything. This is a dramatized retelling. Marcus had learned to notice the small things: a scanner's soft click, the whisper of paper tearing free from the receipt roll, the way light pooled across the counter at noon and turned fingerprints into tiny maps. He worked the midday shift at the neighborhood market, not a big chain, not a place of flashy uniforms, just a modest storefront where regulars traded stories for groceries and kids learned the geography of the block between cereal boxes and the fruit stand. Marcus had been there 3 years. He knew how to fold a plastic bag so produce wouldn't bruise. He knew Mr. Alvarez took his coffee black and without conversation. He knew the barista on break would bring back an extra muffin if the drawer came up short. On that Wednesday, the store hummed its usual soundtrack: the soft clatter of carts, the register's polite beeps, a radio tucked above the frozen foods that spilled low on the upbeat side of a midday show. Sun slanted through the front panes in bright strips. Marcus stood behind his counter with his hands in the practiced, half gesture of a man who knows where every price tag and pulse of human urgency will fall. His uniform shirt pressed neat at the collar. He smiled a little at the grandmother buying bread. He slid a pack of gum across to the teenage boy who could never remember correct change. He exhaled and leaned into the rhythm. It was the kind of ordinary that makes ordinary people invisible, until something sharp slices through and leaves everyone looking in one direction. The man came in like a storm. He walked fast, shoulders squared in a posture that wanted attention. He wore a hat turned backward and a jacket that had seen better winters. His voice was the kind that didn't ask to be heard. It announced itself. At first it was just the edge of rudeness, comments about slow service, a complaint about a coupon policy. But the edge deepened quickly into something uglier. The words that followed weren't sudden. They landed like a shape that had been rehearsed. Marcus heard them and felt the air in the store change. The hum quieted. Conversations thinned into the sound of everyone else holding their breath. The radio became background static, the beep of the scanner unnatural. A few heads turned, slowly, like flowers to a heat source. The man didn't lower his voice. He raised it. He spoke with venom laced through each sentence. He hurled racist abuse toward Marcus, language that sought to reduce Marcus to what the man wanted to see, words meant to shame, to scare, to dominate. No one in the store repeated them aloud. No transcript exists here, and none will be printed. But the intent was clear: to make Marcus small, to shame him for the color of his skin in front of everyone. For a moment, Marcus froze. Not because the words had power over him. He had learned, over a lifetime, the many ways the world could aim to flatten a person, but because for a second he had to decide how to move. There are many violences that start as noise. The first impulse in such moments is often a reflexive return of heat to heat. Marcus had felt that reflex. He had been told to be harder, to answer with equal volume. He had been taught to mirror loudness with loudness. But in the pause, he felt something else: the responsibility of being the person behind the counter, the one customers trusted to move everyone along with little interruptions of grace. He chose a different kind of strength. He took a breath and kept his hands visible on the countertop, palms down. He spoke slowly, in a voice that matched the store's usual decibel level and nothing more. He said what he was trained to say. "Sir, I'm here to help you. If you'd like to speak to a manager, I can page them." He pushed the point of sale screen toward the customer to show the items were already scanned. He made precise motions, neat and unobliging. There was no apology for his presence. There was no invitation to humiliation. For those watching, the pause stretched. Whispers started at the edges. A woman at the end of aisle 3 glanced at her phone, then lowered it. A man in a suit tucked his chin and focused on his list as if chopping carrots could solve the problem. A teenager with headphones swallowed hard and mouthed something inaudible, maybe prayer, maybe a promise to himself that he would not be the kind of person who looked away. Marcus had an internal map he traced in situations like this. He watched the man's hands, tense, making little fists at the seams of his jacket. He listened for the first slide toward physicality, the sudden sound of something breaking the threshold. He noticed the way the man tried to make eye contact, to set his gaze like a stake. He also noted the tiny betrayals in the crowd. No one stepped forward, not yet, not without a cue. Their silence felt like an invisible weight on Marcus's shoulders, but it would not bend him. The man escalated. He raised his arms and turned from rhetorical cruelty to a performative display. He wanted witnesses. He shouted more, hurling vile, racially charged abuse in a tone that sought applause. He demanded apology for a perceived slight, mere service rendered in the wrong manner, then began accusing Marcus of incompetence and theft, words flung carelessly that could end a person's day, their job, their reputation. The store's volume dropped further. Small sounds, plastic card sliding, breath under masks, became loud. Marcus continued to meet each volley with small, controlled gestures. He repeated, calmly, that he had scanned every item. He asked if the man wanted a refund or the manager. He kept the language precise, because precision strips away the performative layers of intimidation.
There is a certain flatness to procedure that keeps a conversation anchored. Special instructions, return policies, inventory codes. These were the neutral grammar Marcus used to resist the man's attempt to turn the exchange into spectacle. But procedure alone does not always stop confrontations. The man wanted more than to win an argument. He wanted Marcus to break. He wanted the crowd to laugh or jeer. He wanted an audience to reassure him with complicity. For a while, that was what everyone gave him: complicated silence. Some bowed their heads. Some looked away. A few glanced around for a manager, for someone else to take responsibility. A young mother tightened her hold on her child's hand and edged toward the other side of the store. A teenage employee stocking shelves in the back peered between boxes, scared of getting involved. Watch how he refuses to fight back, and why that matters, Marcus thought briefly, almost as if testing the cadence of his own analysis. He did not want to be a martyr. He did not want to be invisible. He wanted the moment to end without escalating into fists or arrests. He believed that dignity could be a form of resistance. The shouting continued. Then a small crack of motion. Someone in the crowd raised a phone and began to record. The man noticed and changed tactics. The presence of a camera on his side flickered like a green light. He wanted to be loud on camera, to have his cruelty broadcast. People around him stiffened. Recordings create witnesses, but also give bullies the sense of larger audience and validation. It was then, as the commotion grew, that the rhythm of the store was altered again, this time by movement from the front door. A newcomer stepped in, distracted by his own day, his own small errands. He was recognized by the ripple of nods and gasps that always accompany a familiar face in a divided room. The newcomer carried no uniform, no badge, just a quiet aura of someone used to being seen. Not everyone in the store immediately knew his name. Some did. A few teenagers exchanged quick, excited looks. A woman by the coffee counter mouthed, "Is that him?" He had the look of someone who belonged to the public, stylish, relaxed, moving with the efficiency of somebody who had learned how to be on stage and off it without being confused about which was which. It was plausible he might be in town for a show. Plausible he might be picking up something quick between engagements. It was not implausible at all. The man at the register noticed first. There was an instant like a current running through the air, a collective intake of breath. People began to jostle for vantage points. Phones were raised faster now, not to give the angry man more oxygen, but to capture the shape of what might come next. The possibility of being seen by a wider audience changed something in the room. It is remarkable how quickly the public shifts its center of gravity when a familiar figure steps into a tense scene. Marcus did not know the newcomer. He did not care for celebrity and had no desire to be at its center.
But he felt the same easing of tension that the rest of the store registered. The newcomer's presence made it harder for the antagonist to claim moral cover. Fame can be a public mirror. It reflects behavior outward. The man's voice faltered for a second. He saw that his performance had a new audience. That falter was all Marcus needed. The newcomer moved toward the counter. He did not shout. He did not push. He threaded into the group with the casual assurance of someone who has learned to talk to a room rather than yell at it. Up close, his presence was not an offense, nor an armor. It was a steadying hand on the scale. He spoke, and the voice that filled the store did not come out of bluster. It came in even tones, measured like Marcus's own responses, but with the additional weight of a public voice. He said simply, "That's not okay." Not a sermon, not a lecture, a direct accounting. The man at the counter blinked, surprised more by the moral clarity than by any enforcement. People around them shifted into listening positions. The store's noise dropped again, but differently, less claustrophobic now, more expectant. There was a slight pause in which the antagonist looked not at Marcus, but at the newcomer, gauging whether the newcomer would join the chorus of those who had looked away. "He's asking you to stop," the newcomer added. "We don't tolerate that here." This is the moment that, in any number of retellings, is the fulcrum. The rules of civility realign. The newcomer uses social power not to overpower, but to call the community to account. He didn't yell. He didn't physically interpose himself between the antagonist and Marcus. He simply named what was happening and refused complicity with it. That naming drew attention. It framed the scene. The antagonist's posture shifted subtly. For a man who thrived on performance, being called out by someone with a public presence was disorienting. He had counted on the crowd's passivity. He had not counted on public shaming. Suddenly, the store's eyes were on him, and the weight of those gazes felt different. Still, he did not leave. He tried a different tactic. He doubled down, louder now, anger braided with embarrassment. He demanded apologies and accused Marcus of overreacting. He tried to recast himself as the offended party, a familiar maneuver that asked the room to rewrite the narrative. But the newcomer, calm and present, kept the focus where it belonged. He pointed out that racist abuse is unacceptable. He asked the manager to handle the matter. That request made the institutional structures move. It allowed authority to step in not merely on behalf of a celebrity, but on behalf of the store and the people within it. The manager, who had been in the back sorting invoices, came forward, eyes hard under the fluorescent lights.
Security staff, summoned by the manager's radio, emerged from the back with measured steps. There is a dignity in procedural response. It converts moral outrage into action without spectacle. The antagonist bulked as security approached, and the crowd's caution hardened into presence. A few people in the store, emboldened by the newcomer's intervention, began to speak up. Voices that had been quiet now had a new tenor, firm, protective. "He needs to go," someone said. "This isn't a stage for that." A young man who had been tucking groceries into his cart stepped forward, not to push, but to position himself between Marcus and the antagonist in a way that said clearly that the cashier would not be isolated. Others murmured in agreement. A chorus grew, not of fans, but of neighbors refusing to let hate be the loudest voice. The antagonist, robbed of his chosen audience and confronted by the combined social force of a public figure, customers, and store security, was escorted out. His refusal to stop the racist tirade had reached a point where remaining inside would invite more consequences than he wanted. He left muttering something that could have been an apology or a last attempt at provocation. It dissolved into the street noise as the door swung shut. He did not come back. Inside, the soundscape shifted again. Where there had been tension, now there was a kind of release, not triumphant, but relieved. Patrons returned to their shopping with the awkwardness of people who had witnessed something sharp and necessary. The manager stayed at Marcus's counter, speaking in careful tones about how the store handled such incidents, about security, about a willingness to press no formal charges, but to make clear that such language and intimidation would not stand in their space. He offered Marcus the opportunity to step away if he wanted a break, to take time for a drink, to speak privately. Marcus declined the rest but accepted a manager's handshake, a small official recognition that his dignity was being restored not merely by celebrity presence but by institution. People came closer then. They brought compliments, condolences, offers of support. A woman in her 50s placed her hand briefly on Marcus's shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry you had to hear that." An older man slipped him a $10 bill with an embarrassed smile and a murmured wish for better days. A teenager who had been at the front earlier held out a pack of gum and said, quietly, "You handled that so calm." The gestures were small, the kind of solidarity that doesn't fix the wound but affirms the person. Marcus's face held no triumph. He looked weary and steady. There was an odd kind of relief that someone, anyone, had stepped in before it escalated. But his calm had not been passive. It was a demonstration that dignity can be a public force. He had refused to trade his composure for the spectacle the antagonist craved. That choice had shaped the eventual outcome. News of the incident spread quickly, as such things do now. Phones caught the end of the altercation, the newcomer's voice steady, the agonized pause as security moved in. Clips traveled across platforms. Some praised the newcomer for stepping in. Others debated whether celebrity intervention was necessary for a bystander effect to occur. For Marcus, the public conversation felt distant. He felt the store's support, the manager's acknowledgement, the neighbor's kindness. Those were the measures that mattered. There is a temptation, in stories like this, to make the public figure the hero. The narrative arc seems tidy. Bully confronts citizen, star arrives, bully is shamed, order restored. But the truth felt more complicated to Marcus and to those who had been there. The newcomer's presence mattered. It lent a social authority that made it easier for other witnesses to find their voices. But the real pivot had been the combination of Marcus's quiet resistance and the crowd's eventual refusal to remain silent. Celebrity had been a catalyst, not the source of change. The newcomer, who had stepped in with that simple line, "That's not okay," did not stay for applause. He remained at the counter just long enough to affirm the manager's handling of the situation and to offer a few words to Marcus. He said earnestly that words like that had no place here, that hearing such abuse was painful, that he was glad Marcus had not stooped to meet hate with hate. He offered a handshake, not extravagant, not performative. Marcus accepted it. The handshake was a bridge between two ordinary lives intersecting in an extraordinary moment. After the man left, things settled. The manager offered Marcus the rest of the day off. Marcus declined, preferring to finish his shift. Work, in the end, is a return to ordinary things, scanning barcodes, making change, making small talk. People who had been there earlier came back to buy another coffee, to check an item they had missed. The radio resumed, tentative at first, then with more volume. The store felt less sharp, as if the air had been sifted clean of something corrosive. There were practical follow-ups. The manager filed an incident report. Security measures were reviewed. The store put a brief statement on its door for customers who had stopped in during the event, noting that abusive behavior was not tolerated and thanking patrons for their support. Those were institutional moves. They mattered in the sense that they recorded what had happened and set expectations for the future. But Marcus measured things in smaller ways. The neighbor who started bringing cupcakes for the staff 2 days later. The regular who began leaving a note with an extra tip that said, simply, "We see you." The teen who started a small online post celebrating Marcus's calm and dignity and urged people to shop local. The community's response built quietly, the sort that doesn't get headlines but changes the texture of daily life. There was also another kind of aftermath that lived in private. The reverberations that happened in Marcus's chest at night, in the way memory loops through an incident and decides what to keep. He replayed moments, not obsessively, but like someone trying to make sense. He thought about the point where the antagonist had chosen an audience. He thought about the young man with the headphones who had mouthed something like a prayer. He thought about the stranger who had stepped forward and the way a single clear voice can change the moral weather in a room. Marcus didn't want the story to be read as a lesson that people must wait for celebrities to act. He knew the danger of that narrative. He had experienced, in the quiet hours, the small choices that had stacked into an outcome. His choice to stay calm, the manager's choice to take responsibility, the shopper's choices to shift from silence to speech. Celebrity had provided a lever. Levers are tools. They don't build a house on their own. The stranger who had stepped in, a public figure known to many, but still just a person on that day, later posted a short message on his own account. He did not make himself the story. He wrote about the need to call out abuse, about how small actions can make a difference, about the responsibility of being recognized in public spaces. The post did not name Marcus beyond a general, the man at the register, respecting privacy, and it encouraged people to be ready to act in small, practical ways when they see injustice. That post fueled some of the public conversation and drew attention to the store and to Marcus. But Marcus found himself more moved by a handwritten note that arrived at the counter a week later. Anonymous, folded in an envelope, thanking him for staying calm and courageous. There are subtleties in how people respond to the visible and the invisible. Celebrity shines light quickly, but it can also leave shadows. Marcus felt the light and tried to let it warm rather than burn. People brought him flowers once, then cookies, then a small stack of gift cards from neighbors who wanted to be practical. The manager scheduled a meeting about workplace safety and training in de-escalation, a formal attempt to ensure employees felt better supported. Marcus attended the meeting with a clarity that surprised him. He wanted not just apologies, but systems that made the job safer for the next person who might face such targeted abuse. The public conversation turned, as these things often do, into a mix of praise, commentary, and critique. Some called the newcomer's intervention proof that celebrities can use influence for good. Others argued that dependence on fame to correct social wrongs is unsustainable and unfair. Marcus paid little mind to the punditry. 3. Institutions matter. When a manager backs an employee, names are set to the principles that keep spaces safe. There is another lesson that Marcus liked to tell people, slowly, when they asked about the event. Don't make the moment about the person who interrupted the abuse. Make it about what you will do when you see it. People nodded then, but their nods were more than agreement. They were commitments. The real change comes not from one dramatic intervention, but from a culture that refuses to accept abuse as normal. Weeks later, after the immediate waves disappeared and the regular rhythms reasserted themselves, a young woman from the neighborhood started a small campaign asking patrons to leave notes of thanks for employees who handled difficult encounters with care. The notes accumulated in a jar behind the counter. Marcus read them sometimes between customers. The notes were simple. Thank you for being kind. You mattered today. We see you. You could argue that the messages were small and symbolic, but small things have cumulative weight. They shape how a person goes into the next shift, how they greet the next rude remark, how they believe they will be treated by those around them. The antagonist, whose name hardly matters in the story because his actions were his only imprint, did not come back to the store. If he regretted anything, that regret remained his private business. The public record showed a moment of accountability. He had been confronted, asked to leave, and the manager had taken a stand. There were no arrests reported, no charges filed. The story was not a courtroom drama. It was a snapshot of a community asserting its standards. As for the public figure who had stepped in, he did not seek to become central to the narrative, and that likely preserved the integrity of the moment. He used his presence not to take the stage, but to illuminate the wrong that was happening and to make it easier for the community and institutions to do their parts. That kind of intervention, brief and firm, is what Marcus would later call useful presence. It is the kind of presence that friends or neighbors offer when they refuse to let a moment of ugliness go unchallenged. The market returned to its ordinary life. People continued to come for bread, milk, cigarettes, postcards. Marcus kept his small rituals, straightening the candy display, making jokes with the delivery driver, remembering birthdays of regular customers. But something in the store's atmosphere had shifted. There was a different kind of attentiveness, a keener sense that silence can be a choice, and that people mattered to one another. One afternoon, months after the incident, Marcus stood by the counter watching a new employee learning how to fold plastic bags. He thought about the day the angry man had come in and how each small action had leaned toward a different ending. He told the new employee, softly, "You look people in the eye. You don't give them the power to make you less when they try. And if something happens, call the manager and trust that we'll stand with you." The new employee nodded. It was a quiet lesson, but it moved through both of them like a promise. If there is a simple way to close this story, it is this: dignity is a currency. You can spend it alone, but when you trade it with others, through a manager's firm stance, a neighbor's quick word, a stranger's steady voice, it accrues. The man who had shouted racist abuse wanted an audience to validate him. The store, through the actions of many small people and one public figure's clear refusal to look away, refused to be that audience. The outcome was not about revenge or spectacle. It was about accountability and the restoration of a sense of belonging. So when someone asks what changed in that store, you can point to the public figure who stepped in. His name is known, and his presence was a turning point. But the deeper answer is that a collection of small choices added up. Marcus's calm held the line. The manager enforced standards. Strangers found their voices. Someone called for help. The public figure made the moment visible beyond the storefront. Together, they changed the shape of that interrogation. And that is perhaps the most important thing to remember. Change is rarely a single person's doing. It is the product of many people choosing to refuse the comfortable roles of silence. The next time someone hears hateful words in a public place, they may recall this story, not as proof that celebs must save the day, but as proof that any single intervention can be the cue others need to stand up. If nothing else, the incident left a residue of responsibility, the sense that dignity must be defended, not because it is glamorous, but because it is human. If this story is staying with you, stay with it through its ordinary ends. A manager who cares, a cashier who keeps his calm, neighbors who refuse to be silent. Share it with someone who needs to hear that being seen matters. And if you can, take that light outside the screen. Offer your voice when someone is targeted. Call for help when you see intimidation. And remember that small acts of solidarity accumulate into real change. If you believe dignity matters, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who could use a reminder that we don't have to wait for a moment of fame to do the right thing.